Millionaire sees Maid studying in basement. What happens next will shock you, asterisk. The underground parking garage was quiet that night, the kind of silence that makes even the faintest sounds echo. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting long, pale shadows across rows of expensive cars. It was the kind of place where no one lingered unless they had to. But in one dimly lit corner, far from the elevators, someone was there. Amara, dressed in her faded blue maid's uniform, sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor. Her shoes were neatly placed beside her. Next to her sat a red cleaning bucket, an old cloth draped over the edge, and a thermos she had filled hours earlier. But she wasn't cleaning now. Instead, she had a thick notebook spread open on her lap. Her pen moved quickly across the page, her brows furrowed in concentration. She whispered to herself as she worked. Supply chains, overhead costs, projected profit margin. Her lips shaped the words like a chant, the way a priest might recite a prayer. Each word carried weight. Each note was part of a bigger plan. To anyone else, she was just a maid wasting time. But to Amara, every stolen minute was precious. Every calculation, every chart she drew was a step closer to something greater, a future no one around her believed she could have. Above her, the world carried on. The rich dined in expensive restaurants. The elite came and went in their polished cars. None of them knew that beneath their feet, the woman who scrubbed their floors was chasing something far beyond what they thought she deserved. And Amara had learned to keep it that way. Because whenever she tried to study in public, the laughter followed. "What's the point?" people would say. "You think someone like you could ever run a business?" Stick to cleaning floors. The sting of those words had driven her underground, into places where no one noticed her, no one judged her. And here, in the parking garage, she felt safe. But that night, she wasn't as invisible as she thought. From the far side of the garage, footsteps echoed, slow, heavy, purposeful. Amara didn't notice at first. She was too lost in her notes, her pen scratching furiously across the page. But the footsteps grew louder, closer, until finally, a shadow stretched over her notebook. Her hand froze. She looked up, and her heart skipped. Standing before her was Donovan Hale, the millionaire who owned not only the building but half the properties in the district. He was a man of presence, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a beige trench coat that looked like it cost more than Amara made in a year. His polished shoes gleamed even under the harsh fluorescent light. And now, those shoes had stopped right in front of her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amara's throat tightened, fear gripping her chest. She had worked here long enough to know who Donovan was. He wasn't the type of man you wanted to upset. People said he was strict, cold, impossible to read. Amara quickly closed her notebook, clutching it to her chest as if it were something forbidden. "Sir, I'm sorry. I'll get back to work," she stammered, already reaching for her bucket. But Donovan didn't move. He didn't even glance at the bucket. His eyes stayed fixed on the notebook, pressed against her chest. "What were you doing just now?" His voice was deep, steady, carrying an edge that made the question feel more like command. Amara swallowed hard. She could lie, say she was doodling or writing letters. But something in his tone told her that wouldn't work. "I was studying," she admitted softly. "Studying." Donovan's brow furrowed. "In a parking garage?" Her fingers tightened around the notebook. She didn't know why she answered, only that something inside her refused to stay silent. "Yes, this is the only place where no one bothers me." For the first time, Donovan's eyes flickered with something other than authority. Curiosity. He tilted his head, looking at her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. "What exactly are you studying?" Amara hesitated. Every instinct told her to shut down, to hide, to avoid the ridicule she had grown so used to. But against her fear, her voice found strength. "Business management." She said firmly, "Accounting, marketing, everything I'll need to run my own company one day." Her words hung in the air, bold and fragile at the same time. The silence that followed stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. Amara kept her eyes down, bracing herself for laughter, for disbelief, for the familiar sting of someone telling her she was foolish. Instead, Donovan stepped closer. His shadow loomed larger now, spilling over her in the notebook she still clutched. He crouched slightly, lowering himself until he was almost at her level. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned her face. Then, without asking, he reached for the notebook. Amara's breath caught. Every instinct told her to pull it back, but fear rooted her in place. She let him take it. Donovan opened it slowly, flipping through the pages. His eyes scanned the columns of numbers, the sketches of charts, the carefully written notes. Page after page. His expression never changed. Finally, he closed the notebook with a soft thud. When he looked back at her, his face was unreadable. And then he said just 4 words. Words that froze Amara where she sat. "We need to talk." Amara's pulse thundered in her ears. Those 4 words, "we need to talk," echoed louder than the hum of the garage lights. She clutched her knees, unsure whether to rise or stay seated. Every instinct screamed that this was bad. What if he fired her? What if he accused her of neglecting her duties? The wealthy didn't tolerate mistakes. She'd learned that the hard way. Donovan Hale, however, did not shout. He didn't scold. He simply extended her notebook back toward her. Amara hesitated before taking it, as though his fingers might burn her if she reached too quickly. Then he spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. My office. Bring that notebook." Her heart stuttered. His office? Why? Sir, I don't. But Donovan was already walking away. His trench coat swaying behind him like a curtain, closing on a stage. The sound of his shoes faded until the garage swallowed him whole. Amara sat frozen long after he left, her notebook pressed tight against her chest. The next evening, she almost didn't go. She paced her tiny room in the servants' quarters, torn between fear and curiosity. Her uniform hung on a hook. She had dressed instead in her only clean blouse and skirt. Her hands shook as she tied her hair back neatly. Finally, with trembling resolve, she took her notebook and walked to the elevator that led up to the top floor of Hale Enterprises. The office was a world apart from the damp basement she usually occupied. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glowing skyline. The polished marble floors seemed to stretch endlessly. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat Donovan, reviewing documents with the same intensity he had shown when reading her notes. When she entered, he didn't look up right away. "Sit." His voice cut through the silence like a blade. She lowered herself into the leather chair across from him, feeling small, almost swallowed by its size. Finally, Donovan lifted his gaze. "Tell me," he said, "why business management? Why not anything else?" Amara's throat tightened. She had rehearsed answers in her head all night, but under his piercing stare, the words tangled. Still, she forced them out, because she took a shaky breath. I don't want to be stuck cleaning floors my whole life. I want to build something. Something that's mine. A company that can give people like me a chance." For the first time, Donovan leaned back. His expression softened. Only slightly, but enough that Amara noticed. "You know how many people have told me the same thing?" he asked quietly. "Dreamers. Workers who thought ambition alone would lift them. Most failed." Her fingers tightened on her notebook. "I won't fail," she said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. That seemed to amuse him. His lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. "Then prove it." He slid a thin folder across the desk toward her. Inside were sheets of paper filled with numbers, costs, revenues, a balance sheet that made her head spin at first glance. "This," Donovan said, "is a real company's financial report. Analyze it. Tell me if it's healthy or sinking. You have 1 hour." Amara blinked, stunned. 1 hour? You said you won't fail." His eyes locked onto hers. "Show me." The minutes ticked away faster than Amara had ever felt before. She spread the sheets across the desk, her pen flying as she scribbled notes. Revenue streams, inconsistent cash flow, overhead too high, debt ratios climbing. The problems leapt out at her like warning signs. Her chest tightened as sweat beaded on her forehead. Was this a trap? Was he setting her up to expose her ignorance? But the deeper she went, the clearer the picture became. At the 45-minute mark, she looked up. Donovan sat silently, watching her, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Finally, she pushed the papers back toward him. "This company is failing," she said, her voice steady now. "The debt is unsustainable. Unless they cut overhead immediately and restructure loans, they'll collapse within a year." For a moment, Donovan said nothing. His eyes searched hers, as though testing whether she truly believed her own words. Then, to her shock, he smiled. A real smile this time. "Correct." Amara's breath rushed out in relief. Donovan leaned forward. "Do you know whose company this is?" She shook her head. "Mine," he said simply. Her stomach dropped. He continued, his voice low. "One of my smaller ventures. A restaurant chain I let managers run on their own. I suspected they were bleeding it dry. And you, in less than an hour, saw what my team of paid consultants overlooked." Amara's eyes widened. Why show me this?" Donovan rose from his chair, walking to the window. The city lights reflected off the glass, his tall figure silhouette against the glow. "Because," he said slowly, "I wanted to see if you're just another dreamer or something more." The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. Then he turned, his gaze sharper than ever. "Amara, how far are you willing to go for this dream of yours?" Her breath caught. She didn't know how to answer. Donovan stepped closer, the air between them charged. His words dropped like a challenge, each syllable deliberate. "Because if you're serious, this is where the real test begins." Amara swallowed hard. Donovan's question lingered in the air like a blade, suspended above her. "How far are you willing to go?" Her hands trembled, but her eyes met his. "As far as it takes," she whispered. For the first time, he seemed satisfied with her answer. "Good," he said, pacing slowly back toward his desk. "Because this isn't about books in the basement anymore. It's about survival. Business is war. Every day, someone wins and someone loses. If you step into that arena, you'd better be ready to fight." Amara's chest tightened, but she nodded. "Then teach me how to fight." Donovan studied her for a long moment. Then, with the flick of a pen, he signed a sheet of paper and slid it across the desk. "What's this?" she asked. "An internship," he replied. "Paid. You'll shadow my managers. Learn how real companies live and die. But understand this. If you fail me, you're gone. No second chances." Her breath caught. She looked at the paper, then back at him. "I won't fail you." The weeks that followed were unlike anything Amara had ever known. Her mornings began before dawn, scrubbing floors and preparing rooms. But her evenings belonged to spreadsheets, meetings, and strategy sessions. Donovan kept her close, not out of kindness, but scrutiny. "Read these numbers," he'd bark, sliding another report her way. "Spot the flaw. Tell me why the deal's wrong." At first, she stumbled. More than once, she thought she'd be dismissed on the spot. But each time she corrected herself, pushed harder, and grew sharper. The mansion staff whispered about her new role, some with jealousy, others with awe. The maid in the office. They called her, but Amara didn't care. For the first time, her dreams weren't just pages in a notebook. They were alive. One evening, after a grueling day, she collapsed into a chair in Donovan's office. "I can't," she muttered, her head in her hands. "I'm not like you. I don't have your mind." Donovan's gaze softened, just slightly. He walked to the window, then spoke in a tone she had never heard before. "You think I was born like this? No, I grew up with nothing. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I studied by candlelight because we couldn't afford electricity." Amara lifted her head, stunned. "You," she whispered. Donovan nodded. "I swore I'd never be trapped by poverty again, and I fought my way out. That's why I tested you. I wanted to see if you had the same fire or if you'd break." Amara's throat tightened. In that moment, she saw not just a cold billionaire, but a man who had walked a path not so different from hers. And for the first time, she believed she could make it. Months passed. Under Donovan's watchful eye, Amara transformed. She could read balance sheets like a second language, negotiate small contracts, even pitch ideas with confidence. One night, Donovan called her into his office again. But this time, his tone was different. "I have something for you," he said, sliding a thick envelope across the desk. Amara frowned, opening it slowly. Inside were documents, contracts, ownership papers. Her eyes widened as she read. This is a business license," she stammered. For me?" Donovan nodded. "A startup fund. Enough to get you off the ground. You've earned it." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" He leaned back, his expression unreadable, yet softer than she'd ever seen. "Because once, someone gave me a chance when no one else would. And I never forgot it. Now it's your turn." The following year, Amara stood outside a modest but bright office space with her name on the sign, Amara Solutions Business Consulting. She hired 2 assistants, both young workers from struggling backgrounds. Just like her, she taught them with the same fire Donovan had lit in her. And one afternoon, Donovan himself arrived, stepping into her new office. He looked around, nodding with approval. "You've done well," he said. Amara smiled, her eyes glistening. "Only because you believed in me." For once. Donovan shook his head. "No, Amara, because you believed in yourself." The two shared a rare moment of silence, a mutual respect carved out of trials and late nights, of risk and resilience. Amara had once been a maid in the shadows of a mansion. Now, she stood tall in the light of her own success. And the story that began in a basement ended not with despair, but with hope.